My name is Richard August, and I'll be your host. Our guest is Sue Cienki, Chairperson of the Rhode Island Republican Party Committee, also known as the RIGOP. Welcome to State of the State.
Well, thanks for having me today.
Rhode Island is one of the deepest, deep blue Democrat states. How many registered Republicans are there in the state?
So about 30%, or about between 30 and 33% of the population is registered Republicans, and about 38% are registered Democrats. The rest are independents.
Or unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated.
So, in reality, for a Republican to win state office, the RIGOP would have to reach out to perhaps half or maybe two-thirds of the unaffiliated, right?
Yes, you have to. And when we say unaffiliated, they're not really unaffiliated. They lean one way or the other. We call those the swing voters. So some of them lean more towards the Republican side, some lean to the Democrats, and then there are very few, about 10%, true independents in the state. So we want to convince those people to come over to our side.
Okay. So far, only one Republican, Attorney Chaz Kalenda, has announced he is running against Democrat incumbent Attorney General Peter Nerona this year. Do you have any other candidates lined up to run for one of the other four general offices yet?
Sure. We're actively pursuing someone to run for the governorship. You know, we are looking specifically for someone similar to Don Kachiri or Lincoln Aman with CEO experience, someone that can come in and turn the state around. So we're talking to a number of people. We anticipate very shortly that there'll be an announcement. We also have two people, Paul Pence, who's running for lieutenant governor, and Jean Ligo, who is going to announce on February 21st.
For what?
For lieutenant governor.
Okay.
Also.
So, longtime Democrat Congressman incumbent Jim Langevin shocked everyone by announcing he will not seek re-election this year. Republicans are lining up to run for the 2nd congressional district seat. We have Bob Lancia, who ran last time, and he got 41.5% of the vote. State Senator Jessica De La Cruz, and last week, Cranston Mayor and two-time unsuccessful candidate for governor, Alan Fung, announced for the vacancy. Is there any buzz about any other Republicans that are going to jump into that 2nd congressional seat race?
Well, when it becomes an open seat, you know, some people were hesitant to run against Jim Langevin because he's a 20-year incumbent. But once he retired, there were a lot of people that called and talked about whether or not that they should run in the race. Right now, we do have 3 candidates that have announced, and it is definitely a winnable race. So much so that we're getting a lot of attention from the National Party. They think that we can win the governor's race and maybe pick up some other seats statewide, and they absolutely think that Congressional District 2 is in play.
Is in play, okay. There are reports that freshman state rep Barbara Fenton Fung, Alan Fung's wife, who defeated House Speaker Nick Nattiello 2020. There's some report that she doesn't even caucus with the Republicans on Smith Hill. Is that true?
Yeah, she is not a member of the caucus, but you know, that was her choice. She decided not to. She felt that her constituents would be served by someone that was more aligned, independent, you know, thinking. But I think she voted with the Republicans the other day on not extending the governor's state of emergency and to remove the masks from children in schools. So maybe it was just freshman jitters.
Yeah, but she's not caucusing with the Democrats either, so she's right?
No, she's not caucusing with anybody.
Okay. Some people have described the Republican Party as a circular firing squad. Let me explain. In 2010, Lincoln Chafee, running as an independent, was elected governor with only 36% of the vote. Republican John Robitaille, good candidate, came in second with 33.6. Software entrepreneur Ken Block formed the Moderate Party, and he got 6.5% of the vote. While on the other hand, Democrat Frank Caprio only got 23%. If Block had not run, it's likely, very likely, that most of his vote would have gone to Robitaille, who would have been governor. And then 4 years later, Gina Raimondo won by a plurality of 41%. Ken Block, who seemed to be upset because he didn't get the Republican nomination, convinced former Cool Moose candidate Bob Healy to run as a moderate. And Healy took 21% of the vote. Republican Alan Fung got 36%. Both the Raimondo and Fung campaigns agreed that Healy took 2 votes from Fung for every vote he took from Raimondo. If that's the case, Republican Fung would have been the governor. And then in 2018, we had Republican Joe Trillo running as an independent. He took about 4% of the vote, and the very popular incumbent Raimondo won by a majority, 53%. But nevertheless, there was this picture of former Republican Joe Trillo who seemed to be sniping at the candidates. Why can't the Republicans get behind one candidate for statewide office?
Well, and that's what we hope to do this time, to make sure. I don't think that primaries are necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it helps the candidates get media attention. It helps people, know that the Republican Party is alive and well. But once a primary is over, it's fair, it's accurate. We want that candidate to come out and everybody get behind them. And we're hoping to do that this time. I've talked to everybody that's running. Don't make it personal. Don't have personal attacks. Run on why you think you're the best candidate and let the people decide. Let the people in the Republican primary decide who they want to best represent them. And then everybody, all hands on deck, everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, well, that'd certainly be helpful for the minority party in the state to do that. When it splinters, it's counterproductive.
It is very counterproductive. So we're hoping to fill, the big issue is, of course, school committees, town council. We're hoping to build up a farm team. And then the state reps, we're hoping to pick up several seats there. That's what we want to do.
Speaking of picking up seats, what is the RIGOP's view of the redrawing of the legislative districts? Are any Republicans being gerrymandered out of the office?
So the only one that is really significant is up in Lincoln with Stephen Archambault's district and Tom Paolino's district. Stephen Archambault, I say it was a leakage. He's leaking his district into Lincoln, which he absolutely does not need to do. And it hurts Tom Paolino getting pushed out. So I think tomorrow on the Senate floor, they may make an objection to that. From the Rhode Island Republican Party, we actually filed open meetings violations against the Legislative Commission. We pinpointed 36 different violations, and we're in that process now because they weren't very transparent. They were voting on maps that the public had no opportunity to see 48 hours before they were voting on them.
Which is the requirement.
Which is the requirement. And certainly the commission, according to state law, they are subject to the Open Meetings Act. So that's what we're pursuing. There were 3 separate areas with the maps, the one in Lincoln, the other one is East Greenwich. When the first maps came out, a piece of East Greenwich was given to Evan Shanley in District 24. So Justine Caldwell was going to lose a piece of it. Which was unfortunate. We knew that East Greenwich, that district had to shrink a little because the population grew. So the initial maps were taking a piece of the harbor area, but making it geographically contiguous portion for Evan Shanley.
Who's in Warwick.
Who's in Warwick. They changed that and took out a piece of the town, because Justine Caldwell got upset and didn't want that piece of the harbor to go away because it's heavily Democratic. It just splits the town in half, which is just terrible. And then the last thing is the prison gerrymandering. They made some significant changes to how they're going to count the prisons, the prison population. And right now it's if there's an expectation that someone will be released within 2 years from the census, that they should be counted at their home address.
Rather than in Cranston.
Rather than in Cranston. So it impacts the Cranston districts, it impacts some of the Warwick districts. And why there? It's treated very different than Wyatt, the Wyatt Detention Center, so they're treating prison populations differently. And if you're going to do that, well, what about college students that you count here? Why aren't you counting them in their home states? It could have a significant impact, so we objected to that too.
Is that before the court or the commission?
So right now, it's still, they haven't voted on the final redistricting maps. You know, once they do that, once the final maps are done, that's when you could bring a court action. But until they finally vote on the maps, it's all speculation at this point.
I had forgotten about the question about the prisons. Is that a question at the federal level too? Are they trying to do that so that it would be a national requirement?
So each state, because the elections are done at the state level, each state is trying to decide what they want to do with the prison population. In New York, it was actually a ballot issue, and the population actually overwhelmingly voted it down. So we just don't want this to be a precedent for the rest of the state. It is an insignificant number in Rhode Island. There is not that many prisoners that would fall underneath this, and it doesn't really impact the state reps up in Providence that will gain a couple of more residents in their census, but it could have a significant impact nationwide. So
Sure.
We are talking to the National Redistricting Trust about the possibility of maybe filing a lawsuit with them.
So the commission is really, let me put it this way, the person or the firm that was contracted to redraw the districts is the same firm that has done it for many, many years in Rhode Island.
Yeah, they've done it for many, many years, and they actually do it for several states across the country. You know, they actually talk to the reps about their district lines and how to do it, and they are bound by certain federal regulations about how they can do it, what they can do, the percentages that they're allowed to move lines. We just believe, make them fair. Make them fair, and we can't complain. Whether it falls Democratic or Republican, just have fair lines with natural boundaries.
See, the people that you mentioned, those Steve Archambault, Justine Caldwell, Evan Shanley, those are all Democrats. They seem to be a little infighting there about this, and I just don't understand why they would want to, mess up a fellow Democrat's district. That doesn't make any sense.
You know, it's strange. Some of the representatives, instead of winning by 700, they refuse to win by 400 votes. So there is a significant amount of infighting, and a lot of it has to do with the progressives not happy with the conservative Democrats. So that's where the infighting comes in. You know, who's going to take over? Whose district is more likely to win, more likely to stay in that area.
And if I recall, Justine Caldwell is a Democrat, of course, but she defeated a Republican incumbent.
Yes.
That was very popular, and
yes.
So that might have an impact too, right?
Certainly. She defeated a longtime, very popular Republican, Anthony Giarrusso, by a small margin. She did not win overwhelmingly significant. So I think that is one of the reasons why she didn't want to give up the harbor, because that is a significant Democratic area.
We talked briefly. Now, the legislature, as you mentioned, has extended once again Governor McKee's emergency power authority. And I think all the Republicans voted against this, correct?
Yes, all the Republicans did vote against it. He asked for an extra 60 days to extend his state of emergency. The General Assembly gave him 45 extra days. You know, the nice thing was he actually asked the General Assembly to get involved. Previous to this, both his predecessor and himself were just extending the emergency orders. Right now, I mean, people are going out to restaurants, they're enjoying sporting events. The PC game was filled to the brim the other day. People were enthusiastic and enjoying themselves. Where's the state of emergency? And it becomes crazy to think about that, that people are out enjoying themselves, and it diminishes what a state of emergency actually means, because people are just not going to listen to them anymore. So I just think it's a bad precedent to set.
One of the things that I noticed, and I think there's a comment in today's Providence Journal, that in the sports section, every picture of the high school athletes playing basketball or cross-country track, virtually every student athlete has their mask below their nose or on their chin. And what's the point? Why is the desire to make these kids wear masks, even in classrooms? I mean, at some point we have to. Well, the governor said wait until what, March 4th now?
Yeah, March 4th.
I'm not sure why we had to wait 3 weeks, but does anybody know why?
I'm not really sure what the logic is behind that, but certainly, you see a lot of the other states, it seems to be coastal, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts was dropping their mask mandates for students. It seems to be California, very deep blue states that are insisting that the students still be masked. If anybody wants to wear a mask in school, I think that it should be mask optional if children want to wear that. But 8 hours a day on something that there are no significant studies that say it's healthy for the students or that it has any impact on whether or not they get affected by COVID or they carry it home. And students at that age, the K through 12, don't seem to be impacted the same way that the elderly or someone that's immunocompromised is by COVID. So what are we doing to these children? I'm not really sure. They've already lost a significant amount of time educationally by going to distance learning. We really need to think about their mental health and whether or not they're just virtue signaling to the kids that they have to wear these masks when the adults aren't anymore.
There's also a question about their social interaction and social skills if they're not allowed to be together.
Yeah.
If this distance learning thing was a complete fiasco, actually.
Yeah, I had an anecdotal story about a young child that was 2 years old that was born during COVID. She has never been exposed to a lot of people and she's never seen their faces. And she went onto a plane and saw the plane full of people and she was amazed because she's never seen a group of people like that before. So I just thought, what are we doing developmentally, physically, mentally to these children? They are just falling behind, and that's not good for society.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think state law says the governor's emergency power authority is it limited to 30 or 60 days by law?
So they extended it to 180 days. What the Republicans had done last year is they said the governor can have 30 days, but after 30 days he would have to come to the General Assembly. They went to 180 days, and that's why Governor McKee came back and asked them for the extension, because it far exceeded what he was able to achieve under the current state law. I just think to give him 45 more days is just a farce.
Well, and the precedent, I think, is that a governor will now be able to use almost any excuse to exert executive authority, emergency power authority, which really bypasses the separation of powers between the executive and the legislative branch.
Right, and that's why we call him King McKee.
Well, preceded by Queen Gina.
Right.
Be clear. Okay, in 2020, Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea, who's now candidate for governor, suspended without authority the law governing absentee or mail-in ballots. She mailed ballot applications to every voter on every Board of Canvassers list and suspended the requirement that requires 2 witnesses or a notary that you sign in front of them. Why didn't Republicans challenge this at the time?
We actually did. We actually took that all the way up to the Supreme Court. When we reached the Supreme Court actually said that the Rhode Island Republican Party had no standing. What we needed was a general officer to join the lawsuit with us. The person that should have joined was the Attorney General, Peter Nerona. He did not represent his clients, and his clients actually are the residents, the population of the state of Rhode Island. He did not defend the law. Whether he agreed with what Nellie was doing or disagreed, the law specifically said that you had to have 2 witnesses and a notary, and he ignored it. So what they did was extremely unconstitutional, but we fought it and we were turned down. So, and now, today, the Senate is having hearings and they're trying to codify these changes in law. It's one thing to use COVID as an excuse. This is not an undue burden to try to make sure that the people that are using that mail ballots are actually those people. And nationwide, over 73% of people believe that you should have some type of voter ID. And in Rhode Island in particular, in 2010, it was Representative Anastasia Williams and Senator Harold Metz that introduced the voter ID law because they were victims of someone
fraud.
had voted in their place. So, what changed in 10 years? You know, you need a ID to go to your bank and get your own money out, to get on a plane, to do almost anything. And to have an ID actually means that you exist. You know, and it's not difficult even if you don't drive. We have automatic voter motor here where you can register to vote. And if you don't vote, you can go to the motor vehicle department and get a government ID. And even the Secretary of State, if you need an ID to vote, you can get one there and it costs you nothing. So there are plenty of opportunities to get an ID.
The point you make about what happened in the last election, well, the polls closed on 2020. Bob Lancia, for example, was ahead of Jim Langevin by 10,000 votes. But when the mail-in ballot was counted, 44,000 votes swung over and were counted and Langevin won. Clearly, it seems that Democrats seized on the pandemic to engage in ballot harvesting. Will the GOP engage in ballot harvesting this year if the mail-in ballot legislation passes?
Well, we're going to abide by the law. And if the law says that third parties can ballot harvest, yes, we are absolutely going to. What we have also witnessed is in the 2020 election, about 30% of people utilized the mail ballots. But we've had several special elections since then, and we've gone back to about 10%. 10% can still swing an election one way or another. We had several representatives that lost, won by 42 votes. One in Narragansett, I think it was a 1 vote. So those are close. We want to make sure that we go after people that are going to utilize mail ballots, and we're going to make sure that we can get in the ballot harvesting game. We have to.
Yep. Should illegal immigrants be issued driver's licenses?
You know, I think that the issue becomes, because we do have motor voter, you know, what is going to be the safeguards around that to make sure that they aren't voting? And is that really beneficial to all of us? You know, we know that they're bringing in people late at night into Quonset. You know, who's paying the costs for that? And is this the best way to secure election integrity in this state? I'm not sure. I think it could lead to a lot of issues.
Most people are not aware, I think, that you don't have to show proof of citizenship in order to register to vote.
No, you don't. But there's actually a line there that says you have to be a citizen to vote. And if you are not and you do vote, it's a felony. And it will actually prevent you from actually ever becoming a citizen. In the last election, I know that I had someone that was a green card holder, and she called me up very upset because when she went to get her driver's license, she told them that she was not a citizen and she didn't want to register. And lo and behold, they registered her to vote. So she was crying. And I said to her, "Did you vote?" And she said, "No." I said, "Then don't worry about it." But she literally had to go to her local board of canvassers and ask them to remove her from the list. So things like that do happen. There are always going to be irregularities. Now, if you are giving illegal citizens the ability to get a driver's license, what's going to stop, you know, just a well-intentioned clerk from double checking to make sure that they are a citizen? They're busy. It's a fast-paced office, so you could see people falling through the cracks there. Absolutely.
Governor McKee has proposed a budget for this year of in excess of $12 billion. And last year he asked for less than $10 billion, but suddenly the COVID cash spigot opened and we got a lot of federal money, so the budget came in. The one we have now is over $13 billion. We've had both Democrat and Republican representatives on this program who predicted the inflated budget would become the baseline. Excuse me. Are Republicans concerned about the size of the budget?
Hugely concerned about the size of the budget. We're a small state that has just over 1 million people. If you look in comparison to the states similar in population size to us, such as New Hampshire, their budget is about $6 billion. So it's almost half of what our budget is. Certainly to run the General Assembly, it's well over $50 million now. It is one of the reasons why Blake Filippi, the minority leader, has sued JCLS because they have no meetings. He's not even aware of where the money's being spent, who's giving contracts to the General Assembly. So we want to watch all the pennies. There are over $111 million spent on consultants in the budget that the governor proposed. Why do we need all these consultants if you have all those people working up at the State House? A consultant should only be used for specific purposes for a small amount of time, and we're finding that that's not happening. They're almost on the payroll, and they're getting paid at an elevated rate because they're consultants. So, you know, I wish we had line item veto. Line item veto would open up how we're spending the money, what we're spending the money on. Certainly it would give the press access to how the money's being spent, and it would just be a more transparent budget. It would actually give the governor more control than the Speaker of the House has. And right now, that's not the way it works. The Speaker is actually the most influential and powerful person in Rhode Island politics.
Because he controls the purse strings.
He controls the purse strings.
Through the Finance Committee.
Through the Finance Committee, right. And certainly, you know, legislative grants are something that we always have a complaint about. Who's getting that money? How is it being done? It's not really a competitive process. It has always been who is in favor with the Speaker, and then that's how the Speaker stays in control. So it's just not a great process, the budget, but it is way too high. And certainly when you talk about the amount of CARES and ARPA money that are coming this way, there's so much money, I'm not even sure they know how to spend it. And what is that being spent on? We want to make sure that the citizens of Rhode Island know that the small businesses were severely impacted. Are they getting that money? We're already seeing instances of some nefarious activity that is occurring with some of that money. So we want to make sure that that money is being well spent too.
You want to explain, you use the term JCLS, and I'm not sure a lot of people in the audience know what that means. So you want to explain, because that's a very important point that the minority leader in the House, Blake Philippi, has instituted a suit which is now going to go forward and be heard about the JCLS. Why don't you explain to our audience what that's all about?
Sure. The JCLS stands for the Joint Commission on Legislative Services. It is how the State House is run. And the makeup should be the Speaker, the Deputy Minority Leader, and the Senate President, the 3 Democratic representatives, and then the House Minority Leader, which is Blake Philippi, and the Senate Minority Leader, which is Dennis Algier. So those 5 gentlemen are supposed to regularly meet, hold meetings, have minutes on the meeting, and discuss who gets hired, how that money is being spent, and that they never have meetings. And it was first—
They've never had a meeting.
They don't have meetings, and certainly not meetings that Blake Philippi and Senator Algier are actually ever invited to. So it seems to be the Speaker's private fund, and he gets to decide who's getting hired, how that money is being spent. And like I said, that's over $50 million.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. People don't realize that that is like the fixed overhead of running is that the whole legislature?
State House. That is what it costs to run the State House, and who gets hired up there. So it is a significant amount of money, and we want to make sure that we're good stewards of the taxpayer dollars.
Well, we want to thank you, Sue, for being here with us, and I hope as we get into this season, perhaps you'll come back again with one of the candidates that will soon be announcing, hopefully, for some of these other positions.
Love to come back.
We want to thank our audience for watching State of the State. We are in a political year, and we look forward to bringing you more information about the upcoming election. Thank you for watching State of the State.